Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first call came in like any other. A dispatcher's voice, clipped and tired, reading from a screen. Pennsylvania Game Commission, Southeast Region. Stand by for an emergency relay. Multiple civilian reports of aggressive deer striking vehicles, attacking occupants outside the containment perimeter. Possible rabies. Local police requesting a warden on scene. I was already halfway through a lukewarm coffee in the break room at our substation in Middletown Township, Bucks County. It was a Sunday, and Sundays had turned into the new Fridays since the outbreak. The week had no shape anymore. Just a rotation of alerts, fence lines, and odd animal calls that weren't odd until the last couple months made them ordinary. I set the cup down, wiped my hands on my uniform pants, and picked up my handheld radio. "This is Warden Daniel Mercer," I said. "I'm available. Give me the location." The dispatcher hesitated like she was trying not to editorialize. "Lower Makefield, near the perimeter access road by the big box retail corridor. They're calling it rabid deer. There's dashcam video." Dashcam video. That meant two things. Someone's insurance company was going to have a bad day, and the story was about to grow teeth. "Send it to my phone," I said, "and put me through to whoever's incident commander is on the police side." "Copy," she said. "Also, Warden, your team's channel has traffic." That made me look down at the radio like it might be leaking something. Our team's channel was supposed to be quiet unless we were coordinating fencing patrols. I switched over. The speaker crackled. Then a voice I recognized, Eddie Klein, one of our younger wardens, usually calm, now talking too fast. "Mercer, if you're monitoring, we've got distress calls from the North Fence team. I repeat, distress calls. I'm not getting clear GPS, just fragments. Sounds like they're by the industrial park spur where the deer cut-throughs used to be. Something's pushing the fence." I pressed the transmit button. "Eddie, this is Mercer. Slow down. Who called you?" A burst of static, then Eddie again. It was Sandoval's crew. They were checking the fence line by the drainage channel. His radio, his portable, keyed up, and it sounded like heavy breathing, and then a shout, and then nothing. I tried them back. "I'm not raising anyone." The break room got quiet behind me. I could feel the other wardens listening without pretending not to. "Eddie," I said, "stay where you are. Don't go solo. Put together a 2-person minimum and hold until you have law enforcement with you. I'm rolling to Lower Makefield first, then I'll coordinate with whoever's running the perimeter." "Copy," Eddie said, but he didn't sound relieved. I grabbed my gear, my duty belt with my sidearms secured, spare radio battery, nitrile gloves, a compact trauma kit that had stopped being just in case, and my long gun case from the vehicle rack. In normal years, a warden's long gun came out for euthanizing a deer hit by a car, dispatching an injured coyote, or, rarely, dealing with an aggressive bear. Lately, it had become a tool for creating distance between me and anything that moved wrong. Outside, the air had that sharp winter edge. Late December, the kind of cold that made metal feel alive when you touched it. My truck, a marked Ford F-Series with our agency seal, idled like it was impatient. I plugged my phone into the dash and watched the dashcam clip download. I didn't hit play until I was out of the parking lot, headed toward Route 1 and the sprawl of shopping centers and housing developments that had always made me feel like a stranger in my own district. The video opened with a familiar view. The inside of a compact SUV, windshield framing a multi-lane road lined with bare trees, a strip mall in the distance, and a high chain-link fence farther out. Part of the containment perimeter that had been stitched together in a hurry months ago when the city line became a line on a map with consequences. The driver's voice was shaking. "Oh my God, get out of the road!" A deer stepped into view. Not unusual. Deer had always pushed into suburbs. They liked our landscaping, our gardens, our ornamental shrubs. You could tell a lot about a neighborhood by the shape of the deer brows. But this deer didn't move like a deer. It didn't look right either. Its coat was patchy, and where the fur was missing, the skin looked dark and uneven. Parts of its flank showed gray muscle that should not have been visible. Yet it was standing. It was upright in that steady, athletic way deer are when they choose to be, head high, ears not just alert but locked forward like it was listening to something inside the car. The driver honked. The deer lunged. Not a startled leap, not a nervous bound. A forward, purposeful rush straight at the vehicle. The impact sounded like someone dropped a heavy bag of sand on a drum. Ah, the camera jolted. The driver screamed, then slammed on the brakes. The deer bounced off the hood, hit the pavement, and this was the part that made my stomach go tight. Scrambled back up in a motion that was too fast for an animal that had just been hit by a moving car. It stood. It shook its head like it was clearing water from its ears. Then it took 2 steps and threw itself at the driver's side door, antlers clanging against the window. The driver yelled. A passenger cried. Then the passenger said something that didn't make sense until I watched it again. "It's fixing," the passenger said. It's fixing." On the screen, the deer's shoulder looked wrong, like a joint had been twisted out of alignment. Then, in a series of quick, unnatural movements, it seemed to reset, not like a bone knitting over days, like a mechanism being put back in place. The deer slammed again. Again. It wasn't trying to run away. It was trying to get in. The clip ended when the driver threw the SUV into reverse, tires squealing, and the deer chased it for a few yards like it was drawn to the engine noise. I pulled into the staging area the dispatcher had texted me, an intersection near a grocery store parking lot that had been turned into a temporary rally point for police and emergency management. There were 2 local cruisers, 1 county unit, and a National Guard Humvee parked off to the side with its engine running. A small group stood near the open trunk of 1 cruiser, looking down at something on the ground like it might change if they looked away. I parked, stepped out, and the cold hit me clean. I walked up, keeping my hands visible, and a Lower Makefield police sergeant turned toward me. His eyes were bloodshot with fatigue, and his uniform looked like he'd slept in it. "Warden Mercer?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "Sergeant?" "Sergeant Tom Haskins," he said. He nodded toward the ground. "We got one on scene, or part of one." I looked down. A deer lay on its side, but it wasn't intact. That wasn't the right word. It was intact in the way a broken machine is intact. All the pieces were there, but the system wasn't working the way it should. There was no open gore in the way you'd see from a car strike. Instead, there were torn patches, exposed tissue that looked dry and dark, like it had been out in the air too long. The antlers were there, tangled awkwardly in the fence wire from a portable barrier someone had dragged over. But what drew my attention was the neck and shoulders. The head was twisted at an angle that should have ended the animal, yet the eyes, cloudy, dull, almost milky, seemed to track movement, even as the body stayed still. I didn't step closer than I needed to. "Is it moving?" I asked. Haskins shook his head. It was. We boxed it in with cars. One of my guys hit it with OC spray like it was a dog. It didn't react. It kept slamming into the door. We had to stop it. It dropped, and then it started doing something, twitching, like it was trying to get back up. He swallowed. Then it didn't. A guardsman standing nearby, helmet on, chin strap loose, spoke up. "Sir, with respect, we've been told not to assume they stay down. He had a patch that said his name was Reed. I nodded slowly. Smart advice. I looked at the deer again, watched for breathing, listened for the wet click of lungs. I heard nothing, but I didn't like the stillness. Stillness could be a trick. "Where's the dashcam driver?" I asked. "Went to urgent care," Haskins said. "Not for injuries, for panic. He's a delivery guy. He thought it was rabies until it tried to climb his door." "Any bites?" I asked. "None," Haskins said. "But he said it wasn't alone. He said there were others in the trees." I glanced toward the line of bare oaks behind the shopping center. The containment fence was visible beyond them. A long, straight run of chain link topped with concertina wire, punctuated by guard towers and floodlights that still worked most nights. A suburban buffer zone had formed along the outside of the perimeter. Neighborhoods half evacuated, businesses boarded, roads restricted. It was the kind of place where deer would thrive, because people weren't moving around as much. "Who's running the perimeter here?" I asked. Haskins pointed toward the Humvee. "Guards got it. They're coordinating with FEMA and the state. We're just trying to keep civilians out of the way. We get calls like this every day now. Mostly false alarms. Not today." Reed stepped closer. "Sir, we have a captain on the perimeter command post. He's on an encrypted radio net, but I can call him over." "Do it," I said. While Reed moved away, I knelt just enough to examine the fence wire where the antlers were caught. The strands were bent hard. This animal had hit with force. Not a panicked animal stumbling into a barrier. An animal that didn't care about pain. "Did anyone take tissue samples?" I asked, more out loud than to anyone. A voice behind me answered, "Not yet, don't touch it." I turned and saw a woman in a heavy jacket with a state health department badge clipped to the chest. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she had the kind of face that had learned to be unreadable. "Dr. Reena Patel," she said. "Epidemiology liaison. We got the same alert you did." I straightened. "Game Commission," I said. "Mercer." Her eyes flicked to my gear, to the long gun case in my truck. "We need this contained and documented. If this is what I think it is, it's not rabies." "You've seen it before?" I asked. Patel didn't answer directly. "We've had reports. Infected pets, stray dogs, coyotes. But deer doing this. Deer behaving like vectors instead of victims." She looked toward the perimeter fence. "It changes the math." Reed came back with a field phone in his hand. "Captain's on his way." Haskins rubbed his face. "You want to tell us what we're dealing with, Doc?" Patel hesitated, then made a decision. "There's a working theory," she said. "The human strain, whatever it is, doesn't just stay human. It can cross species under certain exposure conditions. Most animals die, but some don't. Some adapt." "Adapt how?" Haskins asked. Patel's mouth tightened. "We're seeing signs of accelerated tissue repair, abnormal aggression, a drive to approach noise, heat sources, movement. And we're seeing something else, a behavioral pattern that looks less like sick animal and more like—" She stopped herself, as if saying it out loud would give it power. "Predation," I said quietly. Patel nodded once, like she didn't want to. A vehicle approached from the direction of the fence, another guard truck. A man in camouflage uniform climbed out, walked over with a steady gait, and extended his hand. "Captain Mark Dellinger," he said. "Pennsylvania National Guard. You the warden?" "That's me," I said. "We also have distress calls on our warden net from the North Fence team." Dellinger's expression didn't change, but I saw something behind his eyes shift. "Where exactly?" "Industrial Park Spur," I said. "Near the drainage channel, Sandoval's crew." Dellinger turned to Reed. "Get the map. Now." Reed moved fast. Haskins raised a hand like he was in a classroom. "Captain, we've got at least one aggressive deer and reports of more." Dellinger looked at the deer with an appraising stare that I'd seen in people who had learned to see threats as shapes and trajectories. "We'll take custody of the carcass," he said. "Doc, your team can sample it. Sergeant, keep your people clear. Warden Mercer, if you have distress calls from inside the buffer, that takes priority. We need to know if the fence is compromised." "It's not inside," I said. "It's our team on the fence line, but the calls sounded bad." Patel's voice cut in, sharper than before. "If your people are down by a drainage channel, that's a vulnerability, standing water, wildlife corridors. If infected animals are using it..." Dellinger held up a hand. "We're going," he said. In the next 5 minutes, the parking lot turned into a small operation. Dellinger ordered a quick response team. 2 guard vehicles, 4 soldiers in full kit, Reed included. Haskins sent 2 officers to block off the road leading toward the industrial park. Patel made calls on her phone, speaking fast in a mix of medical and logistics that sounded like a different language. I moved back to my truck, loaded my long gun, keeping the muzzle down, chamber status safe, and checked my radio. Eddie was still on our channel. "Eddie," I said, "I'm with guard and police. We're coming toward Sandoval's location. Give me your exact position." Eddie's response was immediate, like he'd been waiting with his finger on the button. "I'm at the maintenance gate by the old power line cut, near the industrial park. I've got Warden Jenna Wu with me. We can see the fence line from here. There's movement in the tree line, something big." "Hold," I said. "Do not go into the trees." There was a pause. Then Jenna's voice came on. "Dan, it's not deer, not just deer." The way she said it made the cold feel less like weather and more like a warning. I climbed into my truck and fell in behind the guard vehicles as we rolled out. Lights flashing but sirens off. Sirens drew things now. Noise was a beacon. We drove through the suburban buffer zone, past quiet neighborhoods where holiday decorations still hung in windows like people had left in the middle of celebrating. Past a playground with an empty swing moving in the wind. Past a church with a sign that had been changed by hand. "No services. Stay home. Pray anywhere." We passed a checkpoint where concrete barriers and a metal gate controlled access to the perimeter road. Guards waved us through, faces covered, eyes scanning. Then we reached the industrial park, a place of warehouses and loading docks, the kind of landscape built for efficiency and abandoned quickly when the supply chain broke. The drainage channel ran behind the buildings, a concrete-lined ditch with patches of ice and shallow water, bordered by brush and a thin line of trees that separated the industrial land from the fence itself. This was where deer had always crossed, where raccoons ran, where coyotes hunted at night. Where now something else might be moving. We pulled up near the maintenance gate Eddie had described. Eddie and Jenna stood behind a concrete barrier, rifles held low but ready. Their faces were pale, their eyes fixed on the tree line. I stepped out and met them. "Status," I said. Eddie pointed. "There," he said. At first, I saw nothing but the usual winter tangle of branches. Then something shifted, low to the ground, fast, too smooth. A deer moved through the brush, but it wasn't the same as the one from the dashcam. This one's antlers were smaller, maybe a young buck, but its posture was wrong. It kept its head too level, as if it didn't need to watch where it was going. Its legs moved with a quickness that didn't match its body's condition. And behind it, I saw another shape, smaller, darting, like a dog. "Coyotes?" I asked. Jenna shook her head. "Look at the feet." The smaller shape paused, half hidden by a fallen branch. It lifted a paw, and even at this distance I could see the outline was off. The toes seemed longer. The joint angle looked wrong, too flexible. Then it stood up on its hind legs for a second, as if it had forgotten it was supposed to be an animal. My mouth went dry. "Where's Sandoval?" I asked. Eddie's jaw clenched. "We can't reach him." The last thing we heard was shouting. Then the radio keyed up and we heard scraping, like someone dragged something along the fence. Dellinger walked up behind us. "Show me the breach," he said. Jenna pointed toward a section of fence where the chain link was bowed outward. Not torn, not cut, pushed. "Fence alarm didn't trigger?" Dellinger asked. Eddie answered. "It did. 2 minutes after Sandoval keyed up, but the alarm's been unreliable since last week's storm." Dellinger swore under his breath. "All right. We're going in as a line. No hero moves. Warden Mercer, you're with me. Wardens, you cover our flanks. Sergeant's people stay back and hold the roadblock." Haskins, standing near his cruiser, didn't look happy, but he nodded. Patel wasn't here. She'd stayed at the parking lot with the carcass, coordinating the lab pickup. Part of me wished she was here. Part of me was glad she wasn't. We moved as a group toward the drainage channel, boots crunching on frost. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold concrete. My breath came out in short bursts. We reached the edge of the ditch and looked down. There were tracks in the mud along the shallow water. Deer tracks, yes, but mixed with others. Dog-like tracks. Raccoon prints. And something else. I crouched, careful not to step on anything, and held my flashlight low to rake the light across the ground. The odd tracks were not paw prints. They had toes, 5. The heel pad was elongated, like a foot that sometimes bore weight upright. "Those aren't human," Jenna said quietly. "No," I said, "but they're closer than they should be." We followed the tracks along the ditch until we reached the section of fence that had been bowed. The chain link here was bent outward in a broad curve. The top wire was intact. The concertina wire above it was still tight. Something had pushed the fence without cutting it, without climbing over. "Like a battering ram," Reed murmured. Dellinger leaned in, examined the bend. "This wasn't one deer," he said. On the other side of the fence was the containment perimeter proper. Beyond that was a strip of cleared land, then more fencing, then the darkness of the quarantine zone that used to be the edge of Philadelphia's outer suburbs. We weren't supposed to be on this side without a full authorization, but we were already here, and the fence was telling a story that didn't care about paperwork. Eddie's radio crackled suddenly, loud in the cold. "Help!" A voice rasped. It was faint, broken by static. Every head snapped toward the sound. "Sandoval!" Eddie barked. "Sandoval, this is Klein. Say again." More static. Then a sound like someone coughing, deep and wet, then words, barely audible. "Fence, not deer." The transmission cut out. Eddie looked like he might sprint. I put a hand on his shoulder hard enough to stop him. "Hold," I said. "We go as a group." Dellinger nodded. "Move," he said. We advanced along the fence line, scanning the trees, the ditch, the brush. The woods here were thin, more like a strip of cover than real forest. But cover was cover, and anything that could move fast could disappear in it. We found Sandoval's hat first, a green game commission cap, crushed, lying near a patch of flattened grass. Then we found his radio. It was still clipped to a piece of uniform fabric that had been torn away. The radio's push-to-talk button was stuck down, held by pressure from the mud. That explained the open mic. I picked it up with gloves. checked the display. The battery was low. Then Jenna hissed, "Dan, look." She pointed at the fence. There were antlers tangled in it, like the ones back in the parking lot. But these were bigger, and there was more than one set. 2 sets of antlers, twisted together, caught in the chain link. The heads they belonged to were gone, not in a messy way, just absent, like someone had taken them away. And below the antlers, pressed into the mud by the fence line, were those not quite human footprints. They weren't coming from the outside. They were coming from inside the perimeter. Dellinger's voice dropped. That means something came through. Reed's eyes widened. "Captain, if those tracks are inside—" "I know," Dellinger snapped. "Don't say it." A rustle came from the brush to our left, not a wind rustle, a deliberate movement. We froze. Something moved between 2 trunks, fast and low. I caught a glimpse of fur, grayish, mottled. Then it was gone. Eddie whispered, "It's watching us." Dellinger raised his hand and signaled the soldiers into a tighter formation. He leaned toward me. "Warden, what's your assessment?" "My assessment," I said, keeping my voice low, "is that we're not looking at rabies. We're looking at infected wildlife that's still mobile and still coordinated. And those footprints, whatever made them, isn't acting like a deer." Dellinger nodded once. "We need to find your missing warden and get out." We moved again, slower now, scanning more, listening harder. The quiet felt wrong, like the woods were holding its breath. Then we heard it. A faint clicking sound, like hooves on concrete, but irregular. Then a second sound layered over it, like nails scraping lightly against metal. We rounded a corner of the ditch and saw a maintenance culvert, a concrete tunnel under a service road that ran toward the fence. It was a known animal corridor. We'd put motion sensors here last year to track deer movement. Now the motion sensor box was hanging open, wires dangling. And in front of the culvert entrance, half in shadow, stood a deer. It faced us, head tilted, ears forward. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Its eyes were that same cloudy color I'd seen on the carcass back at the staging area. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, something moved in the darkness of the culvert, multiple shapes, low, quick, with those wrong feet. The deer took 1 step forward. Then it did something I had never seen a deer do in my life. It made a sound, not a snort, not a bleat, not a grunt. A kind of vocalization that sounded like a human trying to speak through a damaged throat. Eddie sucked in a breath. No. The deer took another step. Dellinger's voice was tight. "Back up, slow." We backed up as one, maintaining our line. The deer didn't charge immediately. It watched, like it was measuring. Then the shapes in the culvert darted out. They were raccoons. At least they had the size and general outline of raccoons. But their fur was patchy, and their movements were too fast. Their heads seemed too large for their bodies, jaws opening wider than they should. And their front paws, those hands, looked like they were made for grabbing. They ran toward us, not scattered like frightened animals, but in a straight line. "Stop!" Dellinger shouted, more reflex than command. The soldiers raised their weapons, but the line didn't fire. Not yet. Nobody wanted to be the first to put rounds into something that still looked like wildlife on paper. One raccoon veered toward the fence, climbed it with shocking speed, then dropped back down, as if testing it. Another darted toward Reed's boot. Reed stepped back, and the raccoon snapped at empty air, jaws clicking. "Captain," Reed shouted. Dellinger made the call. "Engage if they breach the line. Short bursts, watch your background." The word engage landed like a weight. Not shoot, not kill, engage, neutralize, stop the threat. The language we'd all adopted because it kept us from thinking too hard. The raccoon surged. I raised my long gun, but I didn't fire. My job, my instinct, wasn't to spray rounds into an animal corridor. My job was to think like a warden. Control, distance, exit routes. And then I saw something that made my hands go cold. The deer's flank had a split, a tear in the hide that exposed muscle. As it moved, the tear seemed to tighten, edges pulling closer together. Not healing fully, but changing fast. The regeneration from the dashcam wasn't a trick of the camera, it was real. These things weren't just infected, they were being kept in motion by something that didn't respect normal biology. A soldier fired. 2 controlled shots downward as a raccoon lunged toward his shin. The animal tumbled, rolled, then sprang up again like it hadn't been hit. It kept coming. That broke the hesitation in the line. Another soldier fired, then another. The raccoons scattered, then regrouped like they were trying different angles. One darted past the muzzle flashes and hit the fence, claws scraping, then dropped and ran along the ditch like it knew where the weak points were. The deer stood behind them, watching. Not charging, not fleeing. Directing. "Mercer," Jenna said, voice tight, "that deer is controlling them." "I know," I said. A new sound came from deeper in the trees. A heavier rustle, branches snapping. Something bigger was moving. Dellinger's head snapped up. "We're leaving," he said. "Now." We began a controlled withdrawal, backing away from the culvert, keeping muzzles trained low where the raccoons moved. The animals kept probing, lunging, retreating, never fully committing. Then the bigger sound came again, closer. I glanced left and saw a shape between the trees. A deer, yes. Large, tall, mature, but the silhouette was wrong. Its front legs looked thicker. Shoulders bulked like it had been working against resistance. Its head was low, antlers forward. And its gait. It moved like something that had learned to run from watching humans run. It stepped into the open and I saw its eyes, clouded like the others, and scars along its neck that looked like bite marks, old and healed. This wasn't a deer that had been infected yesterday. This was something that had survived infection and kept going. Dellinger's voice was hard. "Do not let that get close." The big deer took a step forward, then another. Then it charged. Not a panicked run, a straight-line sprint directly at our formation. Every part of my brain screamed at me to put distance between us and it, but there was nowhere to go fast enough without breaking the line. The soldiers fired, controlled, aiming for center mass the way they'd been trained for human threats. The deer took the hits like impacts, body jolting, but it didn't drop. It stumbled, then corrected itself, legs moving too fast, shoulders driving it forward. It hit the ditch edge, leapt, and landed closer than it should have been able to. Jenna fired a shot that cracked in the cold air, her aim true enough that the deer's head snapped sideways. It still didn't drop. It swerved and slammed into the fence beside us instead, antlers scraping metal, hooves hammering. It pushed, bent the chain link inward. Pushed again. The fence groaned. And behind it, inside the perimeter, I saw movement. Shadows responding, drawn by noise. If that fence gave way, we wouldn't be dealing with a handful of infected animals. We'd be dealing with everything on the other side that heard the commotion. "Fall back to the gate," Dellinger shouted. "Now!" We broke into a fast retreat, no longer controlled, but still trying not to run in a way that would turn into panic. The raccoons chased, darting at our boots. The big deer turned and followed, head low, fast. Eddie stumbled on the ditch edge. Jenna grabbed his vest and hauled him up. I moved alongside them, covering their flank. Ahead, the maintenance gate was visible, a metal barrier and concrete blocks. Beyond that, our vehicles waited. We reached the gate as the deer closed the distance. Dellinger's soldiers piled through first, then Eddie, then Jenna. I was last, backing through, keeping my eyes on the charging animal. The deer leapt. It hit the gate hard, metal ringing like a bell. Its antlers caught on the bars, and for a moment it hung there, legs kicking, body thrashing with strength that didn't make sense. I could see its breath steaming, hear the wet rasp in its throat. Then something else happened. From behind the deer, in the trees, a figure moved. Not an animal shape. A human-shaped silhouette, low and hunched, moving with a jerky speed. My chest tightened. The footprints, the almost human tracks. This wasn't just wildlife. This was the infection building bridges. The silhouette stopped behind the deer and reached out, an arm extending toward the animal's neck. The deer's thrashing slowed, like it was being steadied. Then, in a motion that made my skin crawl, the deer wrenched itself free of the gate and landed on all fours again. It didn't fall. It didn't limp. It regained balance instantly, as if the impact hadn't mattered. Then the deer turned and ran back into the trees, retreating, not chasing. The raccoons vanished with it, like they'd been recalled. The human-shaped silhouette was gone an instant later. We stood behind the gate, breathing hard, weapons up, staring into the brush. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then Eddie whispered, "That thing helped it." Dellinger's face was pale under the brim of his helmet. "Everyone in vehicles," he said. "We're not staying here." We fell back to the trucks and cruisers. Haskins and his officers looked at us with questions they didn't want answered. "Where's Sandoval?" Eddie asked me as we climbed in. I didn't have an answer, and that was the worst part. Not the infected deer, not the raccoons, not the almost human shape. The worst part was the empty space where one of my people should have been. We returned to the staging area near the shopping center, where the first deer carcass lay under a tarp now. Patel's team had arrived. 2 people in protective suits, setting up a sampling kit like it was a routine procedure. Patel came over, her eyes scanning our faces, then our posture, then the way we held our hands like we were still bracing for impact. "You saw it," she said. "More than one," I said. "They're using animal corridors, they're pushing fences, and there are footprints inside the perimeter that aren't animal." Patel's jaw tightened. That confirms what we feared. Dellinger stepped in. "Doc, we just had a deer take multiple impacts and keep moving. We had small animals acting coordinated, and we had something human-shaped in the trees." Patel didn't look surprised, and that scared me more than if she had. "We're calling them cross-species vectors," she said, "but that's the clean term. The reality is that the pathogen, or whatever this is, can express differently depending on host species. Some hosts become mobile carriers. Some become aggressive. Some seem to learn." Haskins rubbed his arms like he was cold, even standing near the idling engines. "You're telling me the deer are learning?" Patel looked at him. "I'm telling you, we've got reports of animals demonstrating problem-solving behaviors they shouldn't have," she said. "Fence testing, moving in coordinated groups, approaching noise sources deliberately, and now, if you're right, interacting with infected humans." Eddie's voice cracked. "Sandoval's missing." Patel's eyes shifted to me, How many people were with him? 2, I said. Sandoval and his partner Jake Maris. I haven't heard from either. Dellinger's posture stiffened. We need to treat this as a personnel recovery, he said. But we also need to acknowledge that if they were taken... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Patel took a breath. There's another piece, she said quietly. We've been picking up reports from other states of animal bites causing infection, not just scratches. Bites. Which means if these animals are out here, the buffer zone is no longer a safe zone. It's a transmission zone. Haskins looked like he might argue, but he didn't. He'd seen the video. He'd seen the deer. I felt my phone buzz with a new message from dispatch. I opened it. Emergency alert. Civilian reports of aggressive wildlife in suburban buffer zone. Avoid wooded corridors. Do not approach injured animals. Report unusual animal behavior to local authorities. The message was going out to civilians, but it might as well have been a confession. We'd built fences to keep infected humans in and keep civilians out. We'd assumed wildlife was collateral. Unfortunate, but secondary. We were wrong. Dellinger turned to Reed. Get perimeter command on the net. Tell them we have suspected cross-species vectors outside the fence. Tell them the drainage channels are compromised. Reed nodded and moved away. Patel looked at me. Warden Mercer, she said, I need you to tell me everything. Every behavior, every track, every sound. I nodded, but my attention kept drifting to the tree line beyond the parking lot, where bare branches clawed at the gray sky. Because once you see a deer behave like that, you stop seeing deer as just animals. You start seeing them as something else. The next hour turned into a briefing that felt like it belonged in a war room, not a shopping center parking lot. Dellinger coordinated with his perimeter command. Patel made calls to state health, to labs, to someone higher up who could authorize resources. Haskins ran interference to keep curious civilians away. I sat on the tailgate of my truck with Eddie and Jenna, going through what we'd seen, drawing it out in plain words like it might make it less unreal. Eddie kept repeating one phrase like he was trying to convince himself. It stood up, he said. That raccoon stood up for a second. Jenna stared at the ground. And the deer made a sound, she said, like it was trying to talk. I looked at them both. We need to reframe this, I said. We're not just dealing with sick animals. We're dealing with infected hosts that are still mobile, still aggressive, and possibly still responsive to something else. Eddie looked up, like a hive? I didn't like the word, but it fit too well. Like coordination, I said carefully. My radio crackled again, and this time it was a different voice, low, strained. Mercer, this is Sandoval. Every hair on my arms rose. I grabbed the radio. Sandoval, this is Mercer. Where are you? Static, breathing. Then Sandoval's voice broken like he was speaking through pain and cold. By the fence, drainage. I'm pinned. Are you injured? I asked. A pause. Not bitten, he said. And the way he said it, like he knew it was the first question, made my stomach drop. Where's Maris? I asked. Sandoval didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was thin. He's gone, he whispered. They took him. They, I said. Sandoval's breathing hitched. Deer, he said, and something else. Dellinger had moved close, listening. He signaled Reed to record the transmission. Sandoval, I said, stay on the radio, give me any landmark, anything you can see. Sandoval's voice came in short bursts between static. Fence, bowed, culvert, motion box, broken, they're in the trees, they watch. Can you move? I asked. "No," Sandoval said. "If I move, they come." I closed my eyes for a second, pictured him alone in that strip of woods, pinned by creatures that didn't act like creatures. Patel leaned in, her voice calm in a way that made it more terrifying. "Sandoval," she said. "This is Dr. Patel. We are sending a team. Do you have any exposure? Scratches, bites, contact with saliva?" Sandoval's voice was ragged. "No," he said. "But I got their smell on me." Patel's eyes flicked to mine. She didn't like that either. Dellinger took the radio. "Sandoval, this is Captain Dellinger. Stay put. We're coming with the recovery team. If anything approaches, you tell us immediately." Sandoval's voice came back as a whisper. "Hurry," he said. "They're learning. They know when radios talk." The transmission cut out. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the engines seemed quieter. Then Dellinger turned to me. "We're going back," he said. I nodded. "We do it smart," I said. "No culvert approach, no ditch line where they can flank. We use the open ground. We use vehicles as barriers." Dellinger's mouth tightened. "Agreed." Patel stepped forward. "If you retrieve him," she said, "he needs to be isolated. Decontamination, full evaluation." Eddie looked at her like she'd slapped him. "He's one of us," he said. "I know," Patel said, voice steady. "That's why I'm telling you the truth." We moved fast. Dellinger organized 2 vehicles, one to approach, one to cover. Haskins offered officers, but Dellinger declined. He needed people trained to follow orders under pressure. Eddie and Jenna insisted on coming, and I wasn't going to stop them. Wardens didn't leave wardens. We rolled out again toward the industrial park, lights off now, moving quiet. The cold had deepened, and the sky had that heavy gray look that said snow might come later. As we approached the maintenance gate, I scanned the tree line for movement. Nothing obvious, but nothing had been obvious the first time either. We stopped short of the ditch and dismounted. Dellinger signaled his soldiers into a spread line, leaving space between bodies so a rushing animal couldn't bowl through all of us at once. I keyed my radio, keeping my voice low. "Sandoval, this is Mercer. If you can hear me, key up once." A second later, faintly, the radio clicked. He was alive. We moved, step by step, toward the spot where we'd found the torn fabric and the bent fence. The mud tracks were still there, frozen now at the edges. The antlers were still tangled, a grim marker. Then we saw Sandoval. He was half behind a fallen log, crouched low, his back against the wood. His uniform was torn, face streaked with mud. His eyes were wide, fixed on the trees like he was tracking invisible threads. He didn't wave. He didn't stand. He didn't move. He raised one hand, palm out, a universal sign. "Stop." We stopped. Sandoval's mouth moved, but he didn't speak loudly. He whispered into his radio, barely moving his lips. "They're close." His voice came through thin. Don't look right at them. They react." That made my skin tighten. "Sandoval," I whispered into my own radio, "we're going to extract you. On my mark. Can you crawl?" Sandoval shook his head slightly. "My leg," he whispered, "twisted. I can't." A soft rustle came from the brush. Everyone froze. A deer stepped into view, just like before. Clouded eyes, patchy coat, body that looked like it should have been in a ditch days ago. It stared at us. Behind it, in the shadows, those smaller shapes moved. Raccoons, maybe something else. And then, between 2 trees, I saw it. A human-shaped silhouette, low, hunched, head tilted like it was listening. It didn't rush. It didn't scream. It just watched. Sandoval's voice came through the radio like a breath. That one. It's not right, he whispered. It walks like us. Dellinger's hand tightened on his weapon, but he didn't fire. He was thinking the same thing I was. If we fire, we draw everything. If we don't, we might not get Sandoval out. I made a decision that felt like swallowing ice. I took my truck keys from my pocket and tossed them back to Eddie. "Start my truck," I whispered. "Slow roll it up the service road and hit the horn, just short bursts, not continuous. Make them focus on the vehicle." Eddie looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. He moved back, low, and a minute later my truck's engine rumbled to life behind us. The deer's ears flicked. The silhouette in the trees shifted its head. Eddie tapped the horn once. A short, sharp sound. The deer flinched, not like fear, like attention snapping. Eddie tapped again, then started to roll the truck forward slowly, keeping it in the open. The deer turned its head toward the truck. The smaller shapes in the brush moved, drawn toward the noise. The silhouette in the trees hesitated. That was my opening. "Now," I whispered. Two soldiers moved forward fast, low, and grabbed Sandoval under the arms. Sandoval gritted his teeth, face tightening as they lifted him. The deer snapped back toward us. The silhouette took one step forward. The smaller shapes surged. Dellinger barked, "Move!" We moved as a group, dragging Sandoval back toward the open ground and the gate. The deer charged, not at the soldiers, but at the space between us, trying to cut us off. A soldier fired 2 rounds into the ground in front of it, not to hit, but to create a barrier of sound and impact. The deer flinched, slowed for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. We reached the gate, hauled Sandoval through, and slammed it shut. The deer hit the gate again, metal ringing, but this time it didn't hang. It bounced back, then stopped, staring through the bars. Behind it, the silhouette stood in the trees, motionless. Then, as if on command, the deer turned away and vanished into the brush. The smaller shapes went with it. The silhouette disappeared last, melting into the shadows like it had never been there. We stood there, breath steaming, heartbeats loud in our ears. Sandoval lay on the ground shaking, his face gray. Patel wasn't here to see it, but I knew what she would say. The behavior wasn't random. It wasn't just animals lashing out, it was testing, probing, reacting. Learning. We got Sandoval into the back of the guard vehicle and drove hard back to the staging area. Patel met us with a decontamination kit and a look that said she was already writing the report in her head. Sandoval sat on the tailgate of my truck while Patel and one of her techs wiped his hands, checked his skin, looked for scratches and bite marks with the kind of scrutiny that felt invasive but necessary. Sandoval's voice was hoarse. "Jake tried to run," he said, staring past us. "He thought he could make it to the gate. The deer... It didn't chase like a normal deer. It cut him off, like it knew where he was going." Eddie's eyes shone. "Did you see what took him?" he asked. Sandoval swallowed hard. "I saw the deer," he said. "And then I saw... hands. Something grabbed his jacket and pulled him into the brush. It was fast, too fast." Patel's face was tight. "Human?" she asked. Sandoval shook his head. "Not like us," he whispered. "It moved wrong, but it had a shape like us." Dellinger exhaled slowly. "We have a new threat classification," he said. "Cross-species vectors and... what, Doc? Human-animal hybrids?" Patel's eyes flicked toward the tree line, then back. "We don't use that term," she said. "Not yet. We don't have enough evidence, but..." She paused. Then quietly, "But if the infection is changing hosts and expressing new behaviors, we need to assume it can create transitional forms." A chill went through me that had nothing to do with winter. Because the perimeter was built on assumptions that infected humans stayed human, that the fence line was a hard edge, that the buffer zone was a safety margin. Now the margin had teeth and hooves and hands. Late that night, after Sandoval was transported for isolation and evaluation, after Patel's team secured samples from the carcass, after Dellinger filed his report up the chain, I sat alone in my truck, engine off, listening to the quiet. My radio was silent, the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, just paused. I opened my phone and watched the dashcam clip again, slower this time, looking for details I'd missed. When the deer hit the SUV door, its reflection in the window showed something I hadn't noticed before. Its mouth opening wider than it should, jaw moving like it was trying to bite metal. Not a deer's mouth. Something else layered over it. I thought about the footprints in the mud, almost human. I thought about the silhouette in the trees. I thought about the way the deer had watched us, waited, reacted to the horn like it understood distraction. And I thought about the antlers tangled in the fence, heads gone like trophies. If you asked me a year ago what I feared on my job, I would have said the usual. An armed poacher, a wounded bear, a winter rescue that went wrong. Now, sitting in a parking lot under the cold glow of floodlights, I feared something simpler. I feared the idea that the infection wasn't just spreading. It was adapting. And in a world full of wildlife corridors, drainage ditches, suburban greenbelts, and fences built by exhausted people with limited time, adaptation was the one thing we couldn't fence out. My phone buzzed with another alert. Another civilian report, this time from a neighborhood farther south, closer to the river. Aggressive animals reported near wooded bike trail. Do not approach. Do not feed wildlife. Report unusual activity. I stared at it for a long time. Then I keyed my radio and spoke into the darkness, knowing someone on the other end was listening, even if they didn't answer. "This is Warden Mercer," I said. "All units, treat all wildlife contacts in the buffer zone as potential infected vectors. Maintain distance, avoid corridors, and if you see tracks that look like feet, call it in immediately." I released the button. The radio crackled once in response, someone acknowledging without speaking. I sat back, hands on the steering wheel, and looked toward the black line of trees beyond the lot. I didn't see movement, but I knew it was there. And I knew something else, too. The perimeter wasn't the edge anymore. It was just where we'd drawn the last line we were confident about. Now, we were about to find out how many more lines we'd have to draw before the woods, the suburbs, and everything between became part of the outbreak's new shape. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.